Okay, hi everyone. Just finishing up our tech test here. Hi Sarah, Sarah's here too. So good to see you guys. I'm so happy to see everyone who's joining for this call. So, all right, I think, we'll give everyone a minute to join. Let us know if you're watching live. Please say hi. I really love when these calls are like super interactive. And I was sharing somewhere the other day, I think it was with one of our community members because she was asking me about doing these Facebook Lives. And I was saying how energized I get when I see comments and when I see likes and people asking questions. So please, let's make this as interactive as possible. So say hi, let us know where you're watching from. We are recording this call, so we'll make sure to share it on the Work Bigger website afterwards. We're doing this in two ways this time around. We do these calls usually for the Work Bigger community in our Facebook group. So hi, Facebook group, hi everyone. But we're also doing it through Zoom because we wanted to invite people who may not necessarily be a part of the community to join this call on civic engagement because it is super, super important, especially with the upcoming elections. So if you're new to Work Bigger and you have no idea who I am Belma. I'm the CEO and founder of Work Bigger. And if you're new to Work Bigger, we are a career development platform with the mission to challenge the status quo and redefine work so that work is really a vehicle for flow and creativity and impact, and also living an awesome life. And we do this in a number of ways. We do this through community. We have a closed, curated group, which is women only right now. It's amazing. We also offer programming and coaching for women who are looking for deeper support around career development and career change. If you're feeling super stuck in your job, in your career, you don't know how to move forward, we provide a service through that. And then we also have a media platform where we share career resources, stories of mission-driven women, and also calls like this. We make these available on our website. And the last piece is we work with companies that are values aligned and future focused to bring our online programming, our coaching network, and our workshops and lunch and learns to them. So for today, we wanted to, Maria and I'm going to let you introduce yourself, but I'll share a little bit about why this call got started in the first place. I saw that in our community, we started having a conversation around civic engagement, and I saw that there were a few questions on how to get up to speed with the upcoming elections. And full disclosure, this is an area that I honestly always feel I'm a little bit behind on. And it's frustrating because I want to feel like I'm informed all the time. I will say Maria's platform, IssueVoter, has helped me increase my civic engagement significantly from what I would say my level of involvement was a couple of years ago before I met Maria. So, and I know I'm not alone with that. I'm sharing it openly because I think that there's just a lot of overwhelm when it comes to what's going on with our government. So the goal of this call is really to identify key resources that we should be accessing to prepare for the upcoming elections. Also, what are the actions that we can take right now to help increase our impact? And then how we can set ourselves up to stay civically engaged year-round. You'll probably hear Maria talk about this, but she often says that it shouldn't be something that we get involved like once every 4 years. This should be part of our daily, weekly habits and rituals. So Maria and I will chat for 30 minutes or so, and then I want to leave time for Q&A because this call is really about you and all the questions that you have when it comes to civic engagement. So with that, Maria, welcome. I'm so excited to lead this call with you.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I'm so happy that we're doing this.
Me too. So why don't we start by giving us some background about yourself and IssueVoter?
So I'm the founder of IssueVoter, and it's a nonpartisan platform. Our mission is to give everyone a voice in our democracy by making civic engagement accessible, efficient, and impactful. And the way that the platform works, I'll talk about that a little bit, and then I'll kind of give some more background about me and why I founded it. But the way that the platform works is you start by choosing what issues you care about. So it can be anything. It can be education, the environment, the economy, and then you'll get alerts before Congress votes on those issues. IssueVoter summarizes those bills into layman's terms along with bullet points from both sides. And then one click sends your opinion to your rep. And then we're the only site providing a very personalized scorecard or report card on how often your rep is voting, how you would want him or her to vote year round. And so in other words, you can see, oh, my rep is representing me, 10% of the time or 50% of the time or 80% of the time. And the goal there is really to help people be more informed voters at the next election. And so you can decide, do I want to reelect this rep right now? So before the election, it's really, we answer that question of, should I reelect my rep? And I think after the election, we answer that question of, you just voted, now what? And the you just voted, now what question is really the reason I founded IssueVoter, because I was a campaign manager in Iowa way back in 2006, before the 2008 presidential election. And I just saw that, especially in places like Iowa, there's so much focus on elections. And not that that's necessarily a bad thing, because we do want everyone to go out and vote. But, Iowa, just like everywhere else, people are disengaged throughout the year when the real work that affects our lives gets done. And you may know that Congress introduces over 10,000 bills each session. They vote on almost 1,000 of them, and we're only hearing about a few on the news. And so, we've heard about the healthcare bill, the tax bill, the DREAM Act, and a handful of others, but meanwhile, new laws are potentially passing every single week. And so I wanted there to be a one-stop shop for people to be able to get alerts before bills are up for vote on issues you care about, because I don't expect people to monitor that and to comb through all this legislation themselves. And then to be able to send your opinion to your rep in a really easy way. And I'm happy to go into more detail on that, but like petitions is one of my pet peeves. So we send people's opinions directly to their reps' offices, which is a lot more impactful than something like a petition. And then finally, all of that kind of outreach, knowing what's going on is great. Being able to have your voice heard is great. But at the end of the day, does it matter if your rep is just going to get reelected? And so that's that final piece of accountability, which I think is so important, of being able to see if your reps are actually representing you.
Amazing. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about why are petitions not effective? I've heard you say that before, actually, but I wasn't aware of that up until I heard you talk about it and express your frustration around it. Can you explain a little bit about why they're maybe not as efficient when communicating with our reps?
Sure. So let me think of how to describe that. I mean, they're really merely a list of names. Oftentimes petitions are not necessarily delivered to your specific representative. So if I'm a rep in Congress and I see just a list of people that signed a petition, I'm not really going to necessarily do anything. And then I also know that those petition signers are never going to be told whether or not the thing they signed the petition for happened or not. They're not necessarily going to get that feedback of what I as a rep did. So I mean, those are some of the reasons. I think that the truth is, bottom line, petitions are list building tools. So organizations and advocacy groups create petitions because they're trying to build their email lists, and they're trying to build their email lists so that they can get people riled up and ask for donations. At the end of the day, that's what it's for. And so let's not be, kind of shy about just like admitting that and saying that. And there's nothing wrong with organizations asking for money and asking for donations. I mean, IssueVoter, we do that too. But it frustrates me when I see advocacy doing things like that under this guise of like, oh, this is going to have an impact, when really they're doing it for list building. I mean, I know advocacy organizations that have created petitions and said, like, kind of behind the scenes, like, well, we know this bill is never going to be voted on, or we know this thing isn't actually going to happen, but we're going to have this petition so that we can like elect people.
Got it. I see. And real quick, not to divert from our conversation, but somebody said that your mic or voice is too soft. Is anyone having audio issues? Please just comment and let us know.
My volume up to the max. So I don't know if there's another way to do my volume.
Mine is up as well. So Amanda, I don't know, maybe it's your computer. Unless anyone else is having problems, please let us know. Maria is a little soft, but can still hear.
I'll go closer to my computer. Or I could put my headphones in. I don't know. I'll just try to talk louder. I'll talk louder.
Okay. Is that okay? Talk louder, or because people are saying, Nicole said, there you go. Okay, great. Yeah. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Amanda. Guys, please, definitely let us know if you're having any issues. That the ladies are saying better when you're closer.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. Okay, amazing. Okay, so now I'd love to talk a little bit more about the upcoming elections. What is one thing that you think everybody should know with the upcoming election in November?
So I think what you said in the very beginning in the intro is really important about keeping things really simple and not overwhelming you. And so Velma mentioned some resources that we would share. And I don't want to share too many because it's not like I want to give you a list of 10 websites to go look at because like that's too much. I think step one for the election is register to vote. If you're not sure if you're registered, there's different ways that you can check, like, am I registered? But really, I mean, you can go to the Secretary of State's website to register, but I will say I personally really like, I like TurboVote. So TurboVote is a website that helps you register to vote, and they make sure that you don't miss an election, including all the really, really local elections. So that's step one, register to vote and do it. I mean, you could even do it during this call because it doesn't take very long to just kind of fill out the form with your address. You might have to like look up something, but definitely just register to vote. I think TurboVote is a great resource to register. And the reason I say do it now is like different states have different rules around the deadline to register. And so New York, for example, is one of the worst in terms of voter laws, interestingly. So in New York, you have to register a whole month before the election, whereas in Minnesota, they have same-day registration. But instead of worrying about all those rules and like thinking about when your deadline is, like just do it today. So I just say register to vote.
I'm sorry not to interrupt, but I'm curious actually from our community and everyone watching, I'm wondering if the registration, like I just am curious to hear like what are some of your biggest roadblocks when it comes to the upcoming election? Is registration one of them? So just feel free to leave a comment and share with us because I'm really curious to hear what it is. Okay. And then, that's my question for the community. Sorry, Maria, keep going.
Yeah, no, that's okay. And yeah, and this group is super engaged and, you know, maybe everyone here is already registered. So another thing you can do, of course, is just make sure your family and friends are registered too.
Let's talk about that because I think that's like bringing people on board, right, with the registration process. I feel like we can all, I know I can do better with that, like spreading that mission in a sense. Yeah. So maybe we can talk about that a little bit.
Okay. So, the second step I was going to say is like just to share a resource about researching candidates.
Yes.
One that I like is called VoteSmart. Is this website VoteSmart? So VoteSmart does a good job of actually. So yeah, biggest issues researching. So as far as researching candidates, I recommend the website VoteSmart. I think it's a great resource in terms of showing you what different organizations have rated those candidaats. So that gives you an idea of how good they are on certain issues and whether they align with you. So you'll see, like a pro-gun organization give a candidate a rating, or you'll see like an organization that's for more gun control give them a rating. And so that gives you an idea, for example, like where they stand. And you can and it has it all on one page where it has a whole list. It's called VoteSmart. And so we'll also, I think, share in the chat, like we'll link to these websites too. But I think VoteSmart's a great resource for researching candidates. It shows you where they're fundraising. It shows you how other organizations have rated them. And I think I like it because it kind of, similar to IssueVoter, where we're like the data's out there and we're just bringing it all to one place. I feel like VoteSmart, like the data's out there, but they're bringing it all to one place about the candidates. Because the challenging thing is, just going to a candidate's website. You guys have probably done this. Like, just going to a candidate's website is not, frankly, I don't usually find them very helpful. I mean, they'll sort of highlight certain issues that they're passionate about. So it's helpful in that you can kind of see their issue priorities. But
it's also biased, right?
Well, I feel like everything from a candidate's website, no matter if they're Democrat or Republican or independent, like it always sounds good. So it's not, to me, it's like not as helpful. The candidates' websites are helpful if you're like actually trying to get in touch with the campaign to volunteer, or you want to like reach someone there. I feel like that, or you want to get on their mailing list so that you can get alerted on when they're having events and stuff like that. Like that's when I would go to the candidate's website. I wouldn't go to the candidate's website to decide if I actually want to support this person.
Got it.
So Vote Smart, I would say, is the second one. And then, I mean, of course, IssueVoter, I'm biased, of course, but I think IssueVoter has been great for me personally. I can tell you that in the last election in New York, I reelected the rep that I had. So but it was really nice because I felt really like confident doing that. It wasn't just, I don't really know who she is, you know, she's this party, so I guess I'll vote for her. It was like, I can literally see that she represented my views 75% of the time, which I think is pretty good. So like that was really exciting to me. And I think that something that people sometimes forget is, you know, there's sometimes an assumption if you live in a certain state or if you live in a certain area that like everyone in there is doing what you want them to do, or you might assume none of them are doing what you want them to do. But it's not always the case. I'll give, you know, an example that I like to give is last summer I spent a lot of time in San Francisco, and a lot of people came up to me and said to me that after using IssueVoter, they saw that Nancy Pelosi was not necessarily representing them. And I found that very interesting because a lot of those people also would, you know, I think they would consider themselves progressive or liberal or whatever word you want to use. But then they actually saw like, oh, Nancy Pelosi, someone who we assume is like, you know, pretty much they would probably assume is agreeing with them most of the time. They can start to actually see which issues they don't agree on. And, you know, I think this is just something to kind of keep in the back of your mind because the primary elections have pretty much passed now. But it's something really important when it comes to voting in primaries. And so that's something I like to talk about a lot is like voting in primaries, I think is very important because that's where you can really reelect someone that closer aligns with you, but is still the same party. You know, so you're not having to make this like very duality, like all these decisions with the two-party system. It's tough because you sometimes feel like, well, I don't know if I like either candidate, but I'm going to go with the lesser of two evils, or you might really like one of the candidates. But I think voting in primaries is where you can really start to like hone in on candidates that more closely align with your priorities. And I saw a question here. So right now, so I believe, TurboVote is national. Vote Smart, I believe, yes, covers every level of candidacy. IssueVoter does not yet. So right now we're at the congressional level, and our goal is to eventually become something that can be used at the state and local level as well, as we grow, as we fundraise, and as we kind of get more resources to be able to cover more states.
Yeah, and Laura says, registration is easy. For me, the biggest block is the overwhelming feeling for researching all the judges.
I actually just saw, I might have to find it. Is it okay if I look a little bit? Maybe you can tell me something. I actually just got an email, like this week, I think, about a resource for researching judges. But I think Vote Smart also has them.
Okay, and we can also share it afterwards. I'm also going to pop into the Facebook group here. Stephanie says, my biggest roadblock is not fully understanding how our political system works overall. I take responsibility for not educating myself. And so it's unclear what impact my vote has and who I'm voting for. Definitely appreciate the info and resources you're sharing here. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for sharing that so openly. You're not alone. Maria, I know you're in the midst of researching the judges, but any thoughts on what Stephanie is sharing here in terms of her concern? Like her biggest roadblock is really understanding like the overall political system. So in a sense, when you don't have a good grasp on the full picture, you're not clear on the impact that you're making.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, I think that, so is there an aspect of it that I should talk about that you want more clarity on? Here's what I'll say overall. Big picture, to me, it's like at the end of the day, elected officials are most concerned with getting reelected. So this is why voting is so important. And at the end of the day, no matter how much money a candidate raises, everyone has one vote. And, you know, that's the thing that is so inspiring about living in a democracy, but also can be so overwhelming and sad when people don't exercise that right to vote. So I think that for me, it's just like, even if you don't understand all the nitty gritty of what happens throughout, like the process of a law coming into law, like at least vote. But I think, I mean, to go into a little more detail, I mean, big picture, the way that it works is, you know, there's, I mean, I don't know how much overview I should give, but like, at least in the federal system, you know, we have our senators and we have our representatives. So every state has 2 senators. there are 435 representatives total across the US. And each representative has about 700,000 constituents. So that's a lot. And even when you hear on the news things about people like phone calling and going to town hall meetings, it's like, I think that's great. And those are great ways to get people engaged. But to me, those aren't necessarily sustainable, and they're not necessarily collecting the majority's opinions, because you're never going to have a room big enough to fit 700,000 people. And you're never going to have enough hours in the day for staffers to answer that many phone calls. And the majority of people just aren't, doing those things, which is why, to me, I think making your opinion known throughout the year online is something that can be really impactful. And that's what IssueVoter is doing and trying to make really easy to do. But you kind of have, you have the senators, you have the representatives. There are some delineation of what types of laws each of those bodies pass. So you'll see things like when there's Senate confirmation hearings, so that the Senate has power to confirm people that the president's appointing. That's like a Senate job. It's not the House's job to do that. But generally, every single law that comes into law has to be passed by both the House and the Senate in the same exact version. So there's kind of a process that they go through also, which is the House might have one version of the same law as the Senate, and eventually they will sort of edit both of those versions. There's a little bit of back and forth so something can pass the Senate, then it passes the House, and then it might be a little bit of back and forth to make sure they're passing like the same version of the law. And then when it passes both the Senate and the House, it goes to the president, and that's where the president can exercise a veto power. So with IssueVoter, we are focused on the House. And so sometimes people ask like, oh, do you cover senators too? And we started with the House because you have more impact when your opinion is being shared with your congressional rep, I think, because they cover a smaller population of people. So I like to focus like more of your kind of outreach on the House versus the Senate. And every law has to pass both the House and the Senate anyway. And most of the laws actually do originate from the House because there are so many more representatives. Like we have, 100 senators, we have 435 representatives. So that's just a little, it's probably not even, it's not maybe the perfect, I'm not a teacher, so I apologize. I've never really given an overview like that. But there's even, honestly, this might sound cheesy, but there's still that old cartoon that's like really cute. I'm Just a Bill on Capitol Hill that kind of talks about like the lawmaking process. I think it's from the 70s, but it's a classic, and it's like, it explains it really well, actually. So people still, I still refer people back to that. It's like this little song about a bill coming into law.
Laura loves the cartoon.
And locally, right? So if you think about the federal level, I think locally it actually functions in very much the same way, just on more local issues. So the local legislature functions very similarly, where a rep can introduce a law, and then it goes through this process of eventually, going to a committee and then going to the floor and then getting voted on. It's literally almost like a copy of what happens at the federal level, but for your state. And then again, you make that same copy, what happens at your state, for your city, or for your school board or something really local. And it is true that it's interesting when people talk about what should be done at the local level and what should be done at the federal level. And that's very much like, almost goes into like your philosophy on how political science and how governments work and what makes the most sense. But right now, for example, there's a lot of higher education issues are actually controlled by the state, for example. So you'll see like a lot of universities really focused on state legislation.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I also wanted to add to Stephanie's comment that I think anyway that it's okay to not be perfect about this whole process. Like one thing that I'm trying to get better at is just educating myself, like starting with where I'm at, right? And then building from there. I think it can feel really overwhelming. Like I need to get fully informed on everything and all the issues, and I need to be up to speed on everything. And I think that's ineffective because we get so overwhelmed with everything that's going on. So it could be as simple as starting with one issue that you care about and leveraging that issue to educate yourself on how the bigger picture functions from there.
I totally agree. I think that's a really good point. And I think that you also can think about how a lot of people, it might not, maybe not so much on people on this call because you guys are here and are interested in learning. But I mean, I think sometimes people will say like, oh, I'm not political. Or you might have friends or people that you work with that are like, I don't like politics. I'm not political. I don't care about any of this. But like, when you really think about it, politics affects like everything we do. And everyone cares about something. So when people say they're not political, it might mean that they don't like, you know, being like the arguing on the news, or they might not like certain aspects of it. But at the end of the day, like everyone cares about something. It's like the air we breathe, the roads we drive on. It's like, you know, the tax when I get my coffee. Like it really does affect so much that we don't even really think about. And so when I think about like impact and having impact, I always think like policy is one of the ways you can really do that. And I'm happy to talk more about even like, you know, if people want to reach out, I'm happy to talk even more about like, if you want to go really deep, I was in school part of a student group that introduced and passed a law. So I can even talk about like, how do you do that? How do you get a rep to, you know, if there's something you want to happen, you can like approach your rep. You can actually call their office and be like, I think this should happen. You can kind of find other reps, doesn't have to be your rep, that also care about it. You can help them gather like co-sponsors. You can literally like, you know, find a staffer or find someone that's going to help you draft a bill. And like, there are ways you can sort of go about eventually getting something passed.
Let's talk about that, because I feel like that could be something that's really inspiring to a lot of the women in our community. What was that process like for you? Like, what did it take for you to get a bill passed? And what were some of the challenges that you faced?
I think that there were a couple components. There's sort of a research component. So there's actually the research of like, what will happen when this is in place? Are there other examples of places where this is a law and it's where it's worked? What is kind of the research telling us? So that's really more like putting like almost like a policy hat and a policy analyst hat on. And it's not that you have to be a policy analyst. It can be, you know, just kind of something that you've thought through, just logic. You know, what will happen, and this is why we think it'll work, and we've seen it work in other cities or other countries. And this is, you know, this is how we estimate like how much it will cost, or it won't cost anything, or whatever the potential effects will be from it. These are some reasons, you know, thinking about these are the reasons people don't like this idea, and here's how we're going to mitigate those. So I think there's sort of like that policy aspect of it, of getting numbers, hard numbers and data behind it. Like, how many people will this affect? You know, will it save time? Will it save money? Like, what's kind of the outcome that you're going for? And putting that into kind of a couple pages. And it's actually very interesting because I feel like government, they still will look at things that look like reports from school. You know, they haven't quite gotten to where like you're not going to give them like a PowerPoint presentation, which I think is more what we're used to doing. And then, so the second part of that is having a lot of meetings. So actually like you yourself, I mean, it does take time. It's, you know, I'm not going to lie, it's like time consuming. So, you know, like scheduling meetings with reps to actually talk about it, to introduce yourself, and going to those meetings with personal stories. Like, we know that these people in the district have said this and they are supportive of it. So I feel like actually meeting with the reps is a piece of it. There's sort of that second piece. And I think the third piece is really showing that you have a lot of support behind you for it. So, you know, in the example where the bill that we passed as students, it was to get a student on the University of Texas Systems Board of Regents. So there was never a student seat. There was never like a student voice at the Board of Regents on that table. And there were other public universities that had one. So that was like an example where we looked at like what other universities are doing this. I can't remember now because this was so long ago. It's like when I was in college. But, you know, I think we looked at like the University of California system had a student on the Board of Regents, like University of Michigan might have. So we said like, oh, it like works at all these other schools, and this is why the student seat is important, and having the student voice is important. And then working out all the details around it, like how is it really going to work? So like actually doing the work for them. Like, you don't just say like, we want a student on the Board of Regents, you're going to pass this law. Like, it gets pretty detailed. So you actually come up with like, this is how this person's going to be elected or appointed, and this is how long their term is going to be. This is how it's going to roll out. This is like, exactly like on September 1st, like exact dates, exact timing, exact budget. So the more detail I think that you have also is how you can like actually get something through, because they can say like, oh, this is feasible, and they've thought it through and they have the whole plan and everything.
Yeah, it feels like very similar to pitching a business.
It is, yeah. No,
Right?
that's a good point.
It's like you need like the storytelling skills, the sales skills, all of that stuff, right? And just to show that there's interest around it, that you're going to get like a backing. Basically, you're going to get support.
Yeah, and just like a business, you know how like in companies, you know, you do pilots and you do tests, or you do like surveys, doing things like that to show like people are supportive of it and that it's going to work.
Awesome. I want to talk a little bit about protests, because that's been a huge thing in the past a couple of years now. Can you talk a little bit about the impact that protests have had on civic engagement, and do you see that as an effective method to get involved? Because like what I hear all the time is that protests are great, but then what is the follow-up from that?
I totally agree with that.
And just I just want to make sure that everyone can hear you. So
yeah, so I really like, so I was actually interviewed on Crooked Media, and I was interviewed with the co-founder of the Occupy Wall Street movement. And, you know, that's a protest that got international recognition. Everyone knew pretty much what Occupy was. At the end of the day, I don't think they would say that that was successful. And so the way he described it, I thought was so great. He basically said, you know, because people will say what a protest does that's great is it creates awareness, right? Like you get a lot of people, it creates awareness. And he kind of used this analogy, which was, well, when you cook, there's a smell, right? You're going to create an aroma, but is that really the purpose of cooking? And he said, kind of, you know, with a protest, like, yeah, of course you're going to get awareness, but what is that really accomplishing? That is sort of a result of it that's going to happen regardless. So I thought that was a really interesting analogy, because people will use this argument that like, oh, but protests build awareness. And I'm on the side that I kind of say, like, sure, go to a protest, just like calling your rep. I would never tell someone not to do that. I would never say, don't go to a protest. I mean, if it's something you're passionate about, go. And because it's a fun experience. It's like fun. It's great to participate. But the organizers need to have a strategy and a kind of desired outcome and an alternative solution, I would say. And this is something I just actually got to hear a speaker. I'm looking up his last name. I probably will butcher it, but he is from Serbia, and he wrote a book. Let me find what this book is actually, because I think this might be interesting for people here. Well, his name is, I probably pronounce it wrong.
it's okay. I may be able to correct you because I'm Eastern European. What is it?
Srđan Popović. He's a Serbian political activist, and he was one of the people that helped topple Milosevic's regime. And he now teaches at Harvard, and he teaches about revolution and how to build movements. And it was like, some of the points he made I thought were spot on. So I'm just going to summarize a little bit of what he said. So, you know, so he kind of talks about, if you're trying to create social change, one thing you can think about is affecting the right pillars. So an example is the March for Our Lives students. They're not saying we should have universal background checks and we want to pass a certain piece of legislation, because they know the chances of that legislation reaching the floor are slim. They're saying other things like, you know, we're gonna put pressure on the private sector, and we're gonna put pressure on retailers who sell guns. And they're kind of going at it in a different way, which can have an impact a lot quicker and sooner. And it doesn't matter. And then at that point, it doesn't matter if there's a law or not, if no one's selling guns. So I thought that was kind of an interesting example. You know, he talks a lot about how you can't just say, I hate this thing. You have to give people hope, and you have to give people a alternate solution. So for example, if Occupy was basically saying this is a protest against capitalism, well, what's the solution? They weren't providing any solution. So I thought, I thought some of the points he made were really interesting around needing a pillar, needing to provide an alternate solution, and also about, he also talked about bringing people in who are not just in that minority group. So he talked a lot about how, when there were marches, he gave an example of a specific march and how, it wasn't just one ethnic group in the march. They asked other people to join them. And, like with the Women's March, there were a lot of other people besides women that participated, which is, and with politics, I think that too often there's so much focus on kind of things that feel very partisan. So it sort of leaves out people who would still actually support your cause, but they're not actually going to join that thing, right? If they don't feel like it's inclusive or it's for them. So, someone might be a, Republican that didn't vote for that didn't vote for Trump. Someone might be a Republican that didn't vote for Trump, but they might not be doing all these other things that like the left is doing, right? They're not included in that. So I think sometimes that's where activism falls short, is they're not inclusive enough.
Yeah, so bringing different groups on board to really make your message heard and to spread that impact versus keeping it to a smaller group.
Yeah, exactly. And so protests, I just think protests are kind of like, I don't know, they can be expensive, they can drain your energy, they don't always have an outcome. They can actually even, they can actually almost help your opposition in some cases. If you have a protest and it actually riles up the other side even more. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm not so convinced that they're effective at all.
No, and thank you for sharing that. I'm curious, what questions are coming up for everyone who's listening, whether it's about protests, the upcoming elections, like what else to do to get involved? We talked a little bit about, like Maria shared 3 resources, and I included links for those. I'll make sure to reshare. We talked about petitions, why they're ineffective, because they focus mostly, or really, it's list building. So, all of that is not necessarily getting to your representative. It's just a list of names, which isn't as impactful. We talked about a little bit about local versus federal. So let us know if you have more questions there, how to get involved on a local level versus state versus federal. Let us know what your questions are, because I think this is a good time to just highlight other things that you guys are struggling with or trying to work through with everything that's going on.
I'm going to type his name here because I butchered it.
Laura said, wanted to go back to check if Maria had the link to a website to investigate judges.
Oh, I need to find it. I didn't find it in that.
Yeah, you know what I'll do, Laura, and everyone else, we can send it. I could send it after.
But yeah, I remember just getting an email about it, and it said something about judges. Yeah, I agree though. I think those are the hardest. And it's important.
Teresa said, thinking about voting, and Teresa, it's the midterms that are coming up in November. She said, who are some people to look into to vote for? So that question, I would go back to, I think it was Vote Smart, in terms of researching the candidates that are up in your state. House of Representatives and Senators. Teresa, I think you're in New York, right?
So Vote Smart is everywhere. It covers every.
Yeah, so check Vote Smart, Teresa, and see, that's the best way to get information on your candidates who are up for re-election. Missy said, it'd be great to include a link to the recording and the websites and Facebook posts. Absolutely, Missy. Yeah, we'll definitely share this on there. And I'm also going to share this on our website, workbigger.co. And I'll make sure to include all of these links in there. And there aren't too many. I want to highlight that because sometimes I get overwhelmed. Like, here's 20 resources, and I'm like, great, now I don't know where to start. Now I'm just overwhelmed all over again. But we've really shared 4: TurboVote, IssueVoter, obviously, Vote Smart, And then we're going to share the judge's link. What ways do you recommend to rally friends, acquaintances to get out there and vote? Yes, I love this question. That's what I was trying to cover before. Maria, what are some things that you've seen that have been effective in rallying friends and family?
So I think there could be 3 ways. One suggestion I'll just say is it's very tactical. It's very simple. Is like send them a calendar invite. Be kind of pushy about it. It's like, so here's the thing about making a plan to vote. They say if you like make a plan to vote, then you'll vote. So it's not just like in your mind thinking like I'm a voter, I know it's the right thing to do. But like make a plan to vote is literally like you need to know like how are you going to get to the polls? You know your polling location. So like literally what I would do is this is me, I like calendar invites. So I like send a calendar invite now to friends and family that's like are you registered to vote? Or even an email or a text message, or if you're in a group chat. And then send one like a couple days before the election, do you know your polling location? And then send like another one like the day before the election, like, block out your calendar, or even a week ahead, like block your calendar so you don't have meetings, all day back to back and you don't have time to make it. And then especially if you live depending on the state you live in, and this is something that actually TurboVote does a really good job of, is they actually will give you TurboVote makes it really easy to vote absentee. So you don't have to go to the polls. I think they'll send you this thing where you can like choose to get an absentee ballot and then you can just mail it in, which I think that's an example of like, are protests effective? Like, yeah, you can get out there and you can yell and scream, and that's kind of like going to the polls. Like, yeah, you still should do that, but it's even easier to just do it from home. You don't even have to go anywhere. You don't have to wait in line. So I'm definitely a fan of like early voting and absentee voting, for example. So early voting, and again, every state is different. So that's another thing that organizations are working on, is trying to advance voter laws in different states. But for some states, they have early voting, which means you can actually go to your polling location like 2 weeks before the election and still vote. So Texas has that, for example. California, I think has, where you can get an absentee ballot and you don't have to really give them a reason. I think you can just get one. New York has something where you can vote absentee you can essentially do your own version of early voting. You go to the Center of Elections, which like in Manhattan, for example, is in Tribeca. So it's pretty central. It's pretty easy to get to. You go to this office building, you get your ballot and you vote on the spot. It feels just like you're at your polling location and you're voting, but it's not on election day. And the nice thing about that, like that's what I did in the 2016 election. I was so glad I did that because the lines were really long. So I didn't have to wait in any lines. You can do like early voting that way, even if it's not your polling location. You can go to the Board of Elections office and vote, depending on the state. Let's see, making a plan to vote. Oh, the other 2 things I was going to say is like, I watched this TED Talk recently about like this organization that's trying to make it really fun to vote. So they have like parties. You could try to make it fun, like organize drinks after, and like, you get like your stickers. And the third way is guilt. So there are studies that show that like guilt actually works pretty well in encouraging people to vote. When you send your neighbors, they did a study where like they basically sent the neighbors like a postcard saying like, did you know that all these people voted? Like, and they had people's names on it. And so if they were like neighbors, they like recognized some of their names. And basically when they see this thing like, oh, all my neighbors voted, I guess I should go do it. It's almost like guilting someone into doing it, but actually is effective. So if you basically are telling your friends like, hey, you and 3 of our friends already voted. Like, yeah. On Facebook, when Facebook gives you like that badge or something on election day where you say like, I voted, it's almost like this social proof thing of like, oh, well, everyone else is doing it. I guess I should really do it. I guess I don't really have any excuse. I don't want to be the only one that didn't do it. So that actually is like pretty effective.
I also want to add, which I think I find really helpful, is having a conversation with my family members and friends and like asking questions openly. Like, I'm unclear on the candidates and what their key issues are, and being open about what you don't know, I think can help drive the conversation and can lead people to just getting more informed and ultimately taking more action. And I share that because sometimes I think that there's some shame around not knowing all the issues and not knowing all the candidates, not getting informed on time. And, I think it could just be more impactful to be open about that versus like feeling embarrassed, because I think that in itself can engage family members and friends in a new way. Like I know, like when I talk about it with my sister and with my husband, it increases my chances of voting significantly because I know they're doing it. I can get information from them. We all live in Hoboken, New Jersey, so it feels like more accessible. It takes like some of the intimidation away. So I think that's just something else that is easy that we can all do.
There's another organization that they're just like friends of ours, called Ballot Ready, and they're promoting something called ballot parties ahead of the election. So I think that's along these lines of like getting together and being like, I have no idea who's on the ballot. I mean, I'll be honest, I don't even know where I'm voting yet because I'm still like in between moving. So I don't know what.
That's because you're like living in 5 different states right now.
I have to figure that out and have to make sure I'm answered. But that's my to-do for today. But they're promoting ballot parties like in October, which is, I think that's a great kind of fun way also to like get people together. It's exactly what you're talking about, Velma.
Mm-hmm.
Doing these, but they just put a name on it called ballot parties. And you have these parties where, you could go to coffee or you could have people over and just like bring a laptop and just start Googling things like who's on our ballot. and I think that's like, you're so right, especially when it gets down to things like judges. I mean, nobody knows. I mean, frankly, like unless you're friends with them, nobody knows who they are usually. I would never be surprised if someone told me they didn't know, who their judge is.
Nicole has a question. I want to make sure, we get to any remaining questions in the next couple minutes. So she says, are there any resources to learn about the accomplishments and effectiveness of past leaders? Meaning, one thing I want to be better at is having informed, intelligent conversations around politics and voting, etc.
I guess it depends on how you define accomplishments and effectiveness. So if it's simply things like number of bills co-sponsored or number of laws passed, for example, like at the federal level, you can go to congress.gov and that information is there, or even at the state level, at the state legislative websites, it'll have that information. But I don't know how to judge. Like, to me, judging the accomplishments and effectiveness, maybe this is just the way that I think about it, and kind of the world that I'm in with IssueVoter is like, to me, a rep is effective if they're representing my views. Maybe that's a very selfish way to think about it, but like, if we have a representative democracy and I'm electing someone to represent me, I want them to represent my views. So that's how I think about that. And that's where I think websites like VoteSmart can be helpful, because you can kind of get a good sense of like what their views are on different issues. Intelligent conversations about politics and voting. I very recently heard about this website. Actually, one of my interns told me it, called ProCon. It's procon.org. So procon.org is similar to IssueVoter, but it's centered around issues, and they have a lot of things. They have actually events. I think they're based in LA. So like if you're in LA, and I'm moving to LA, so I'm actually planning to go to some of their events. I'm hoping to go to some. But they cover different issues, and they actually have both sides. So I think that's a way to get more informed about both sides and see what the different arguments are. And then when you're having these conversations, you can bring up some of these points. And they talk about it in a very pretty thorough and like intelligent way on this website, ProCon. And it's something that I know is even used in schools, when in classrooms where people are talking about issues and having students learn about them. So I can put that in the text box.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Maria. We have time for one more question. So if anyone has anything else to share, please let us know. I'm checking into the Facebook Live, no new questions there. But yeah.
I just want to say I'm so excited to see so many people here and engaged and asking questions. It's really exciting to me to see that all of you are, not just going to vote yourself, but also encourage other people to do so.
Yeah, Laura said no questions. This was wonderful. Thank you so much. Oh, yay. Thank you for joining, ladies. Thank you, Sarah. This is great. Also, I wanted to throw out to you guys in the community, because I know we have a lot of women who are civically engaged and who are super involved. So if there is anything else that you think Work Bigger can do from a civic engagement perspective in terms of resources, please let us know. Like we want to support you guys as much as possible. We want to be able to share these resources more and more. So let us know what questions you have. And then we'll just wrap it up with Maria. Where can we find IssueVoter, and anything else that you want to share in terms of like where the ladies or men on the line can reach you or connect with you?
Yeah, so I had one final thought actually too. If there is a candidate that that you really love and you want to help their campaign, don't hesitate to reach out to them and volunteer. I'm sure they can use phone callers and door knockers, especially leading up to the election. So volunteering for a campaign that you're supportive of, it can be like a kind of a fun way to get involved if you want to do a little bit more. And then as far as me, IssueVoter is simply issuevoter.org is where you can go to sign up, and feel free to reach out to me with any questions. My email is really easy. It's just, it's maria@issuevoter.org.
Awesome. I'm just including it all here. Perfect. Thank you. So I'm going to be sharing this again on the website. I'll send it in our newsletter. Next week, I'll try to get it out on the earlier side. We'll share these links. We'll come back with a judges link for you all. If you have any questions, feel free to ask us. If you're not part of the Facebook group yet, please feel free to join. It's Facebook groups Work Bigger. We just ask that you answer the questions in the prompt and just let us know that you joined through here, because the group is closed and we're curating it. So it's really important that it's a safe space for everyone and that you want to be involved with the community before you join. So please do answer the questions. Otherwise, thank you. Thank you so much, Maria. And thank you everyone for joining. And yeah, I hope you all have an awesome Friday.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everyone. Bye.